The spell we're living under. I think a lot of us like to think that our thoughts going on in our mind are our own. But what if I told you that those are thoughts that were handed to you? Perceptions and ideas that were handed to you at a very early age before you could even say yes or no. And that's what I'm going to address today on Authentically Clear. I'm Rhenae, and I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to dive in deep to understanding the spell. And first, you might ask yourself, well, what is a spell? What do I mean by that? And in short, basic terms, it's conditioning. It's language, perceptions, thoughts, ideas that are handed to us at a very early age as we're growing, getting to know the world, getting to know who we are. And they begin to shape our identity. It's how we begin to identify ourselves in the world. And that's the thing that we really need to start to pay more and more attention to. And a key thing that I want to say right now is keep in mind that our conditioning, our domestication, it's not anything malicious. It's not something that's necessarily done on purpose. This is the way humanity has been, through how cultures have been for hundreds and maybe even thousands of years. So there's no blame in this situation of the spell of domestication. But what is important is that we don't have a blind spot when it comes to that. That we begin to really understand how that spell, how that domestication has formed. And what we really become to understand is that we've been living a life that's been thrown at us. From a very early age, when we come into the world as kind of a blank slate, we're very curious. We don't have perceptions about who we are, who we're supposed to be. There's no one that is born into this world with a toe tag that says you're supposed to be, a teacher or an actress or a doctor or a high-powered lawyer. You just come into the world. And it's with time, while you're growing, while you're finding yourself, and more importantly, as you begin to understand language. People teach you how to speak, and they teach you words, and they teach you what those words mean. And that's when this lie of imperfection begins to creep in and begins to take shape. Through experiences, you learn that people have different expectations of you, different ways that you can be perceived as bad or good. And when you live up to those expectations, you feel loved, you're accepted, you're rewarded. But if you don't live up to those expectations, then there's fear. And that fear is reinforced by not feeling loved, not feeling part of the group, not feeling connected. It develops what I call the lie of imperfection. That there's this invisible illusionary bar that you have to live up to in order for people to love you or accept you or for you to feel whole or connected. And the reality is that that's a fear, and it's a lie. It's an illusion. There is no perfection. You are perfect right where you are. We make errors. We make mistakes because that's part of nature. It's part of our nature. It's part of growing. It's how we learn. But we're subjugated when we're told that there has to be a certain way to perform in order to be loved and accepted as perfect when you're trying to deal with that lie. And that's the spell. That's the spell that taints our life, that has us living in fear that we're never good enough, that has us worried whether or not someone will love us as we are. And for so many of us, it becomes a blind spot because it's instilled so early in life, at such a young age, that we really don't even recognize it in ourselves. And so we keep just running through life, trying to be good enough, trying to reach that career goal, trying to get that perfect relationship, trying to raise perfect children, trying to have everything in our life look a certain way. And we never stop to think why. How did those ideas get instilled in us? Where did they really, really come from? Because the problem with that conditioning is when we're always focused on the expectations of others, the ideas handed to us by others, we stop listening to ourselves. We stop asking ourselves what is really true and what is really true for us, because we're always trying to live up to what's true for somebody else. And you might be asking yourself, do I have this blind spot? Is this something that I do? And I'm going to give you a few examples of signs that maybe you do. If you find that you're a huge people pleaser, that you need to do things that others expect of you because you're afraid that they won't be happy with you, that you won't be loved or accepted, that you might make them mad, then you are probably living with some level of the conditioning spell. If you are afraid to use your own voice because you're afraid what you're saying is going to offend somebody, then the probability is that you are living under the spell. And if you find that you're always trying to live up to an expectation of what your boss or your spouse or your friend thinks you should be, the role that you should play in their life versus the role you want to play, then the chances are you're living in the spell of conditioning and domestication. And with that, I'd invite you to ask yourself, and just take a moment to ask, how much of my life is lived through the lens of the expectation of others? Me trying to live up to what my partner, society, my parents, my children, my boss, what they think I should be. How much am I living life through the lens of who I truly want to be? Are there things that I'm giving up? Are there things that I'm having to let go of and suppress? And in that conversation with yourself, I think you'll find your blind spot. I remember when I was first grappling with this whole kind of concept and someone telling me that I was a blank slate and telling me how I had learned to really run on autopilot with other people's expectations. It was a little bit like, taking the pill, waking up from the matrix, because I spent the next day after this seminar, I'd gone out of town for a seminar workshop, and I remember the next day waking up at the hotel just feeling kind of surreal. A little bit like you feel on those days where life is just seeming to be spinning around you, and you're like, how did I get here? And I spent the whole day really outside by the fire pit journaling and really just going over just ideas of myself and who I was, perceptions of who I thought I needed to be in the world. And I spent the better part of the day really doing that and just coming to realize just how much of my life I hadn't written. That I was so far from being the narrator of my story, that I was so driven by fear and wanting to be accepted and wanting to be loved and thinking if I achieve this next thing, then life would be perfect. And coming to that realization that all of that had really just been an illusion, and one that I had to take responsibility for because I had made those choices. I had just made them from the wrong perspective in a place of darkness or through someone else's lens, however you kind of care to look at it. So there was a huge burden lifted, but then also this sense of overwhelming kind of wow, like now I can write this next chapter from my perspective. I can write through my own lens. I don't have to live up to all these expectations that I had been really just buried with. And that's the part I really want to bring home for you is that yes, we have been living in this blind spot of conditioning through language and perceptions from the time we're very young. So it might be a decade or two for you, it may be many decades. But the beautiful part is when we come into an awareness of it, that's where everything changes. And I think that people fear personal development, spiritual development, um, therapy, and all the things because we're taught to think that life is so hard and we're always taught to look outward for answers, that looking inward can be a little bit scary. And I understand that. It definitely can be just because it's change, it's a different way to look at it. But the thing is, awareness really only takes a moment. It can take a second, it could just take the few minutes that you're watching this video or listening to this podcast. But once you come into awareness, you've really adapted a completely different lens, a completely different filter, or really just taken all the filters away because you're not filtering your life through other people's expectations. It really just becomes a clearer lens for your own authenticity, your own authorship, where you just begin to make observations about where and why you're doing certain things, why they're important to you. Are they fear driven? Are they rooted in love? And you question your beliefs. And that's an okay thing to do. It's not rebellious, it's not selfish. The moment you begin to question is the moment you begin to awaken. Because when we're under the spell, we don't really question it because we've already had this set of rules handed to us. We don't understand those rules have been handed to us by someone else. But when you awaken to the fact that you are the narrator, I like to think of myself as the artist of my life, that I'm not just a physical painting abstract artist, but I'm a life artist. My art is my life, and I like to create it from my point of view, paint with all the colors that I choose to, and then every day is a blank slate where I get to create a new painting. Just not figuratively, but truly, but on all the levels. And that's how I'd like for you to feel too, because it's so empowering. Yes, there's moments of hesitation where you might not know the next step, but that's okay. because the choice becomes yours. You're no longer playing by somebody else's rules. And that's why I want you to understand the importance of the spell that we tend to live under, and how you, with the power of choice and awareness, can awaken from the spell and take back the ownership of your life. No longer live with the lie of imperfection, no longer live with the fear and expectations, but really just begin to live. Because often when we're living with that lie of imperfection and other people's expectations, we feel like we're existing. We feel like the true person we are intended to be is lost. And that's what I want to help you set free, because the moment that you do that, it's not that hard, because it becomes so addicting, because you understand your power and you understand that you have superpowers, even from the errors that you've made. But all those lessons that you've learned have been so powerful, but you're not giving yourself credit for them because you're seeing them as mistakes. So I want to thank you for listening this long, and just let you know that you do have the power of choice and awareness to break the spell. If you'd like to dig in a little bit deeper, I do have a guide called Breaking the Spell that breaks down some very fundamental things that you can use in your life every day to start to do the exercises of awareness and observation, to start taking control and rewriting that next chapter. And I would just want to invite you to join me back on another podcast. And of course, all the things, because I really would like to spread the word. You know, if you can like, share, subscribe, all those good things. But only if it resonates with you. There's no pressure. And with that being said, I'm going to close this out and send you lots of love. Let you know that I 100% have faith in your superpowers and your ability to rewrite your life. Or if you're not rewriting, just understand how fearlessly you can actually live. And so with that, have a beautiful rest of your day.